Yes, thank you. So thank you for inviting me. A little update on this terminology. When I submitted the abstract and got accepted, the original title was Planning a New Houma Language. The community decided afterwards that new wasn't really the best way to describe this. We're still not really sure the best way to describe what we're doing. But for now, I'm just titling Planning and Reclaiming the Houma Language. And I'm speaking on behalf of the Houma Language Project. So just some background information, because I'm just a huge nerd for like old maps like this. So this area in red is what's depicted in this map here. The original settlement is east of the Mississippi River. So this is circa 1720. New Orleans had just been founded 2 years earlier. This map, the proportions are a little off, like they're missing, all of like Pontchartrain, which is as big as San Francisco Bay. But this is the Mississippi River depicted right here. And a better map from 1732 shows several Houma villages near Lake Maurepas and south of Baton Rouge. During this time, throughout the late 1700s and mid-1800s, the Houma were gradually moving southward due to conflicts with neighboring tribes and also with colonial settlers. So historically, they inhabited modern-day Baton Rouge and St. Francisville on the eastern side of the Mississippi River near the modern-day Mississippi-Louisiana border. The red stick for which Baton Rouge is named signified the boundary of the Houma and Bayou Gula hunting grounds. The Bayou Gula are thought to be another Muskogean people related to the Houma, but very little information exists on their language or culture. And as I said before, the conflicts forced the Houma to gradually move southward. The Indian Removal Act forced a lot of the Houma to flee into the bayous of southern Louisiana, which is modern-day Terrebonne Parish. So if I go back to this map, Terrebonne Parish is right on the Gulf Coast here. So it's Terrebonne Parish is very hard to get to. I mean, especially back then where there weren't roads. You had to, take a boat to get to a lot of these settlements. Today, the Houma have an official tribal council, and they are a state-recognized tribe, but they do not have federal recognition. So they don't have any land. They don't get any assistance. So the Houma Language Project, there are several, 2 or 3 known recordings of Houma songs sung by Elvira Molinaire-Billiot and Valentine Dardar. So they were singing children's songs to this missionary, Greg Bowman, who came to Houma in 1979 to do an ethnography. The cassette with these recordings was kind of unknown to anyone outside of those families. It was passed down through the Billiot family to Colleen Billiot, who is Elvira's great-granddaughter, who then shared it with Haley Dardar, who is a relative of Valentine. And together they were inspired to start the Houma Language Project in 2013 with the ultimate goal to revitalize the language for the community. During that time, they approached the linguistics faculty at several universities. So they went to Tulane and then Louisiana State University, where I was an undergraduate. And over the years, I've helped them kind of research the language, research the culture using the resources available at LSU and the Baton Rouge public library system. The existing historical data for Houma includes Swanton's list. This is an ethnography of the Houma written by anthropologist John Swanton in 1907. It contains approximately 80 vocabulary items and phrases, but no complex sentences and not really any description of grammar. The informants, according to Swanton, were 2 older Houma women who were possibly heritage Houma speakers, but their first language was Houma French, which is related to Cajun French. These songs, the recordings of the songs include 2 variants of the song called Chanchuba, which translates to alligator, and a third song which we don't know the meaning of, but we've called Concabina. And if we have time at the end, I can play those for you. There's ample colonial documentation of the Houma tribe, but not a lot of documentation on the language. We think that there might be some record of the language maybe in the Spanish or French colonial archives in Spain and France, or possibly in the Vatican, but getting to those would, huge amount of resources. But we've checked the Jesuit archives in New Orleans and also in Montreal, and we weren't able to find any linguistic information. And this is just an example of Swanton's ethnography, so the English on the left and the Houma on the right. The current linguistic classification of Houma, based on the data available in Swanton's list, as well as some old place names in Louisiana, Houma has traditionally been classified as a Western Muskogean language, but we don't know how divergent Houma was from these other languages, just because there's really not enough information. There are several different trees that have been proposed for the Muskogean language family, but all of them agree that the Western Muskogean branch consists of Choctaw and Chickasaw. And then in the dotted lines, it just, it's not really known if Houma was a distinct branch or kind of a development from Choctaw. So, since not enough data is available to do any thorough reconstruction of Houma, the founders of the Houma Language Project, Haley and Colleen, decided to pursue an alternate method, which is to plan out the Houma language based on known Houma vocabulary, using Choctaw as a foundation to kind of structure the grammar and fill in gaps in the vocabulary. Why Choctaw? Historically, in colonial records, it was noted that Houma, spoke a dialect similar to Choctaw. But besides that, there's a large body of academic and non-academic literature, several grammars, a lot of learning materials that you can find online or in libraries. There's native speakers in close proximity in Mississippi, and personal and historical connections between the Houma community and the Choctaw communities in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. So it's easy to set up those meetings and find native speakers to help us out. The central group for planning the language includes 6 Houma community members, 1 linguist, that's me, and then 1 linguistic anthropologist, Dr. David Kaufman, who is working with Southeast Native American languages. Right now he's working on a dictionary of Atakapa Ishak, which is a language isolate. Yes. The process of this planning process is to observe the trends in historical Houma words, try and find some kind of patterns, overlay those patterns onto Choctaw, and kind of fix any phonological, morphological conflicts if they occur, and then finally at the very end, establish a Houma language curriculum. We're still very early in this process. We have just finished the process of establishing which trends are going to be in Houma. And to do this, we kind of set up comparative data sets. So we have all the Houma information that we have, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Alabama and Coasati, other Muskogean languages, Mobilian Jargon, which is a trade pidgin based on Western Muskogean languages, and the English translation there. So what we did, part of my role in this is to show them how the comparative method works, so that they have an understanding and are able, to do this themselves. Because I, as a non-Houma person, I don't want to be making decisions about the language for them. So we went over kind of each example and compared it to Choctaw and found some rough correspondences. So we have Choctaw E to Houma A, Choctaw O, U, Sha, Sa, and the loss of initial H in Houma. The issue is that counterexamples exist for each one of these, and there's not really any particular environment where you find these. So that's an issue. What are the options then? We could just learn Choctaw and replace, the Choctaw words with their Houma counterparts, the ones that we know. But what the community wanted to do is over-apply the trends that we saw onto Choctaw to create, this historically informed version of Houma that could have possibly been spoken, but we're not sure. So when a linguistic choice needs to be made, it's brought up to the group. We go over all the data, and I explain if anyone has any questions about the comparative method or linguistic topics in general, I can help answer those. And each Houma member votes on which choice they want. So here's an example. So like in Intro to a Historical Linguistics Method, we isolate the feature we want to look at, lay out each example with that feature, or where we think it would be. And we went with whatever appears more often. So in this case, we have loss of initial H in 4 examples, 2 examples where we have one and the other, and then 1 example where it's there. So what we decided to do, we just dropped the initial H. Generally, these decisions are made on 2 main principles, so proximity to historical Houma data and language distinction. The proximity to the historical data, they want to be faithful to what exists of the Houma data available, but they also want to kind of develop a distinct linguistic identity for themselves. And this is the alphabet that they decided on. Long A is represented with an acute accent, nasal vowels with tilde. This is kind of a remnant from Swanson's list. They wanted to keep that particular spelling convention. And this sound, which is usually a voiceless lateral fricative, has become a voiceless dental fricative in modern Choctaw. So they wanted to just keep that just because it's easier to pronounce. Other decisions include the syllables not ending in a nasal consonant. You would just use a nasal vowel. I need to do a little more digging. I'm not sure about the oral vowel versus nasal vowel distinctions. I have to look at that a little bit more. This is still very much work in progress, so yeah, any suggestions are definitely welcome for that. And then also we decided at this point to attach the morphemes to the root verb. So just an example in Houma versus Choctaw. The current progress, we're converting a Choctaw dictionary into Houma just so that we have a base lexicon to use to start building language lessons. We're using the Choctaw dictionary published by the Oklahoma Choctaw in 2016. I believe it's called the New Choctaw Dictionary. So several group members were each taking a letter and converting each dictionary entry into Houma based on those trends we decided to apply. I'm also currently developing a Python-based program which generates random sentences in Houma, and eventually I'd like to create a kind of website or mobile app so that people can kind of just pick up the language that way. Quickly, I just want to talk like the role of identity in language planning. The choices made by the Houma community, so the choices to over-apply those trends, even though there were counterexamples, that it reflects a need for a distinct linguistic identity, especially because they don't have federal recognition, they don't get government support, they don't have any land. And the Houma land is also rapidly being lost to climate change. So remember the Terrebonne Parish that's right on the Gulf of Mexico, and that's one of the areas of the U.S. that is changing the most. A huge amount of land has been lost just in the past decade, and that's where a lot of Houma elders live. That's where a lot of the historical Houma information sits. So it's been a big project to kind of digitize all the information there and make sure it's kept. So the Houma identity is also, it's critical to the community because that's, a lot of, all they have. Since they don't have federal recognition, they've been fighting for recognition since the early 90s, and that fight is still going on. We're not really sure if or when or if that's going to happen. So what they do is they really, they're very proud of being Houma, and they'll teach their kids all these Houma traditions from a very young age. There's tons of summer camps, powwows, and craft fairs all throughout the year. And these are just some quotes from the Houma community who are in this project. So, it is my hope that we can fully restore and reclaim Houma so that we can begin a new generation with the tools to learn their heritage and culture. My reason for participating in this project is to bring a sense of identity back to our communities. Language is an integral part of culture. I hope to achieve change with it within myself in terms of connecting to my ancestors pre-colonization and with my community to show them that there is so much to be proud of in being Houma. So again, this choosing these sounds is a way for them to reinforce their home identity. It's something physical that you don't need land for, you don't need government assistance for. It's something that the community can use to help transmit their culture. And then very quickly, just the role of technology in language reclamation. I know we talked a little bit about that in previous talks. So all the meetings that we use to discuss the Houma language have been over Google Hangouts since we're all over the country. So I'm in the Bay, a couple are in Texas, Louisiana, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, and we'll meet every week to go over whatever topic we need to. And then for messaging each other, we use Facebook Messenger and Discord. Historical documents, so all those old maps and everything, all the journal articles talking about Houma, and also the missionary manuscripts. They're scanned and uploaded into Google Drive and also Zotero for community access. So as long as you have an internet connection, you can access those documents and all that cultural information. The dictionary work that we're doing is done via Google Sheets. So each member can contribute at their own pace, and it's a collaborative environment. So multiple people can be working in the same document at the same time. And so these group members are also, they're all millennials, so they have a lot of experience with these new technologies like the Google Office Suite. And that is helping, I think, tremendously in terms of how quickly we're doing things. So this, the alphabet and the deciding, looking at the data and deciding to apply those trends, that only started in November of last year. So I think that's going relatively quickly. Eventually, and like I said before, a full language teaching dictionary app will be available maybe a couple of years, who knows. Yakuke, thank you.
I have two questions. Sorry.
No, please.
One was, I didn't quite get what you said about voiceless L. What did they decide? Are they keeping it in the orthography, or are they using the TH in the orthography?
So in the Choctaw orthography, this represented the voiceless lateral fricative, but in modern Choctaw and among the younger speakers, it's turned into the dental fricative.
So what are the Houma deciding to do?
They're keeping the convention for the lateral fricative, but pronouncing it as.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
The other question is, it's hard to verbalize, but I guess I'll sort of try to be devil's advocate, even though I don't believe it, to ask the question. So they've been trying to get federal recognition for a long time, and federal recognition is something we all hate because there's this checklist. The big one is language. Houma have tried to have cultural things. They have trap lines that they follow in canoes that make them look slightly different from the rest of Cajun culture, but they had trouble coming up with the cultural continuity at all. My question, I guess, is how much of this motivation is let's get a language so we can then get federal recognition versus, this is our true identity, let us recover it. The reason I ask that is because I think the government's position, not mine, the government's position is that I think the Houma were considered just a bunch of different people that were driven there from a lot of different tribes, from slavers and war and all this conflict. And they just ended up in this residual area so that there wasn't a common culture or a common language. And now, obviously, they feel a common identity, so they want to recreate it in some way or capture it in some way. So so the real question is language reconstitution for them something to capture a heritage they never had, or is it a heritage they really have, or is it just to get federal recognition, or what is it?
Based on what I have access to as a non-Houma person, they had a heritage. There's a lot of historical documentation that they've gathered, but I don't have access to a lot of things, and I don't know what their motivations are. Not that I haven't asked, but that they aren't really comfortable saying. So I'm sorry, that doesn't really answer your question, but
No, that's fine. It's problems just that they try so hard and they can't match the government's demands for cultural continuity and the language was, there's just so very little of the language. And then you might even ask, what the heck was Swanton writing down anyway? If it was from semi-speakers, was it really this, or was it some Choctaw or something like that? So I think I can see why the government hasn't given them federal recognition, but that doesn't change the fact that they have their own needs and wishes and agenda.
Just to kind of play off of that, that's the situation for most California tribes. Any plot of land where it's federally recognized is a refugee area with like the reservations by executive order where like 7 tribes are placed there. Hoopah, we like to say we're all Hoopah, but we've got a lot of Wailakis in there, and Tala was because it was a refugee area. And then later in the 20s, little tinier plots of land, areas, we have a similar situation. So those of us that think of us as pure aren't, you know, and it's complicated. I would just say too, just to kind of what's making me think of is, you know, don't be surprised if doing this, you know, the people who are speaking this connect with a spirit of the language, or, you know, don't throw away that connection to the land or think that the land is important because that's where it was spoken and it's recorded there in belief. And so that might inform your process later by their decision making.
Right.
It's complicated.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Dr. Mara?
I know you and I have correspondence.
Yes, you sent me your dictionary. Thank you very much for that.
And I would love to talk with you some more. I will say, just as one comment, I am so thrilled to see that you are writing verbs all together with their affixes. I don't understand the Choctaws and their desire to, you guys can look. I mean, that is all one word in the Choctaw. And, you know, phonological rules go over all this and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's crazy. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I'd love to talk to you more about some of your decisions. I guess I will just ask about one phoneme that you don't have. What happened to sh?
So there were slightly more instances of sa than sh in the Houma data set. For example, Choctaw Shakchi was Houma Sakche. And there were slightly more examples of that correspondence in the Houma data set. So again, that decision was kind of inspired by, you know, having Houma be distinct. So it causes some conflicts with other words, but then we're you know, mapping out those contingencies.
Well, I think it's great to be distinct in terms of having your own spelling and pronunciations, but, you know, the way, I mean, Megan was talking about this losing phonemes can lead to, I mean, even if the historical record is incomplete, those are clearly contrasted phonemes in Chickasaw and Choctaw, although they're not in the rest of Muskogean. So, I mean, that's something that actually makes Western Muskogean distinct. So I don't believe it's likely that Houma inherited only having one fricative of that type. And, I mean, the fact that you had it in that sentence that you put on the board, I don't think counts as anything, because I actually think most Choctaw speakers would not pronounce that with a sh. because the sh assimilates the s
Mhm.
before the sa prefix.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the Houma there is absolutely perfect, but it doesn't prove that Houma doesn't have the sh. I would just invite you to maybe possibly, since this decision only dates from November, to reconsider that particular decision.
Mhm.
You know, there are other things I could ask you about, but that one would be one that I think you might want to think about, because, you know, losing information like that doesn't improve the health of the language, I think.
Right. That particular decision was motivated by this example. So it's translated as "Do you want to eat?" Es pate bana. It's not marked with. It's just written as S according to Swanton. So that's why that particular choice was made.
I just feel that, you know, you could possibly think about this more. I mean, sh is a really important grammatical morpheme as well as just a phone. So anyway, I mean,
Okay.
obviously.
Yeah. Thank you.
Made your own
Thank you.
decision.
Time for another question.
I heard a couple of different things. One, you had made mention of things moving at a kind of lightning paced speed because you're working with a lot of millennials. And then I also heard you mention that there's some information, understandably, that you don't have access to. And I'm curious, because this is coming from my own work as well, is it the elder generation that that you're finding more challenges having access to certain pieces? Because if it's the millennials, I'm just curious how that's working out. It's like, okay, we're working this technology together, but there's this piece that you don't have access to.
From what I understand, the Houma are reluctant to share that kind of information outside of the tribe. Just a lot of it has to do, I think, because of this legal battle with federal recognition. There have been some conflicts with other neighboring tribes. So I'm not sure exactly why I don't have access, but I think it's not because they're millennials.
And part of where I was going with this question is, you know, you talked how you guys pretty liberally use Google in various formats. I just heard somebody buzz about anything that is put up on Google is propriety of Google. And I thought about that and said, oh my God, because I know with my heritage language, everyone's like, we don't want you to share with so much of the language. And so the thought comes to mind that, then I best get away from Google. So I just wanted to put that out there.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'll look into that. Yeah, I'm not sure of the legal status as regarding like linguistic information. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll look into it though. Thank you.
One more question.
I was curious about the name of the language, with the Houma, with the H.
Yep.
And one of the conventions that you've adopted,
Yes.
the initial H,
Yes.
is on. And one of the quotes that you had called the language Houma.
Yes.
So is that is it?
Yes. Based on the phonological decisions, Uma is the name of language, and we actually have that actually happens to line up with some historical information where it does lack the H. So possibly free variation, maybe. There are like other examples of the use of initial H. So like in the top right-hand corner there. Yeah. Well, yeah. So there's
Choctaw H, initial H, it's often lost.
yeah. So yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you.